Welcome to A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life. This is the place to be for stories to inspire and uplift when life doesn't go according to our plans. I'm Laura Muirhead, your host and the reigning queen of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life. I can't wait to share the plot twist stories of my guests that will inspire and uplift you when life didn't follow the plan, right here on A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life podcast. Hello and welcome to this episode of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life. I'm your host, Laura Muirhead, and I am so happy to welcome to this episode today, Katie Bock. Katie is one of the co-authors with me of Entangled No More, the international best-selling book. And Katie, welcome. I'm so happy you're here today, and come and introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do and where you are in the world.
Well, thank you, Laura, for having me. I am thrilled to be here today. I love the title of your podcast, If Anything Happened to Me on My Way to My Life. And I am a mama. I am a yoga mentor, a coach. Sometimes I feel like I'm Mary Poppins with all the things in the bag. But I really am passionate about supporting women to rediscover themselves. I think life happens to us and we can get so lost in what's unfolding in life that we lose ourselves and we forget ourselves. And so I'm really passionate about supporting women to reconnect to their power, their intuition, their inner magic, their ability to create a life that feels good for them.
I love that. That's a lot, and it's really important work, especially right now. I feel like, yeah, and you've got a lot of things that you sort of juggle. So I'm sure that a lot of the people that you work with have the same thing, where they're like you said, they're doing all the things. They're moms and working and trying to balance their life. So I love that. So come and tell us a little bit about how you came to be you weren't, this isn't how you started out in life. I imagine that you didn't start out realizing that you could help women do these things. So come and tell us a little bit about your journey and your A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny because when I had booked to be on the podcast, I was like, gosh, what am I going to talk about? And I was going to talk about one thing. And then as I started thinking about it, I was like, there's so many funny things that have happened on the way to my life that there's so many different things I could talk about. But my journey to where I am today and kind of being on this mission to create brave spaces to support women in rediscovering themselves really started when I kind of broke free from an abusive relationship, toxic relationship. And it was, when I was 19, I was pregnant and I was in this abusive relationship, and a family friend took me to a yoga class, and she went to every single yoga class with me, I think to make sure that I showed up every week and I went every week. But in that, I think it was 9 weeks of prenatal yoga, my entire world shifted. And I had, in so many ways, remembered myself and reconnected to myself. And it was really from that point on that I kind of credit yoga in its fullness, not just the physical practice of yoga, but there's so much more to yoga than just a physical practice, to really kind of teaching me how to be aware of myself and how to stay connected to myself, body, mind, and spirit. And it's been that journey of breaking free from an abusive relationship, having to create the boundaries around protecting myself, protecting, my child, and then creating a life that actually feels good, that I actually want to live in, like healing those wounds of not being enough, not being worthy, the people pleaser, the perfectionism, all of those things. And by no means are they totally healed and they never show up anymore, because life doesn't work like that. You heal things and then they still come up. It's all about the awareness you create around it. But I think that in all of these different things we can walk through in life, if we credit it to be something major or something minor, we can still get lost in ourselves. We can still get lost in the moments. We can get lost in motherhood. We can get lost in a job we take. We can get lost in what's unfolding in our lives, in relationships, in moments and experiences. And ultimately, you're a soul here to experience all of these things. And you don't have to be lost in it. You can stay connected to that soul. You can stay connected to yourself. And I think that as I've moved through these different things in my life of, being lost in this abusive relationship, getting lost in motherhood because out in the world, motherhood is like, oh, you do for your kids and you do and you do and you forget yourself. And it doesn't need to be like that. But it's so easy to get lost in that. And just getting lost in growing a business. And what does that look like? And what does that mean? And how do you have to show up? And what does success look like? So much of how we define these things is based on the outside circumstance and the outside perspective, and we get to define them for ourselves. So I think moving through this kind of breaking free from toxic relationships, getting lost in motherhood, getting lost in business, failed business launches have just really propelled me to this place of like, how can I support myself and how can I support others to stay connected to themselves?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's really important. I know you talk about in Entangled No More in your chapter, you talk about the relationship that you had and breaking free from that abusive relationship. And I think it is so hard for so many of us. We do get lost in that, and there's a level of, I think, even not feeling maybe worthy that we can that we can have more or deserve more. And same thing when you're talking about motherhood. Yeah, here we are lost in just diving into taking care of the kids. And I think that so many times moms don't realize not only do we need, it's important, like we deserve to have time for ourselves, but it's also really important to have that um, reconnection with ourselves so that we can fulfill our roles to reject what's the word re-energize ourselves, rejuvenate, and come back fully present. And we feel guilty for those things. And then again, if you're trying to have a work or grow a bit, go to work and have a career or grow a business, all those things do, we wear so many hats that it's hard to balance everything and to realize like, okay, yeah, we're lost in whatever thing we're doing, and let's take a minute. Or even like you said, for yoga, to whatever your practice is, whatever fills you up. Like, it's so important for us to give ourselves time for those things.
Absolutely. And so often too, we're doing all these things on autopilot. We are showing up in our relationships, if it's romantic relationships, friendships, if it's motherhood, in our businesses, in life, and we're moving without being consciously awake because we're stressed and we're overwhelmed and we're lost. And when you create this space to, even if it's like 2 minutes, even if you're like, all I got today is 2 minutes to just like pause, breathe, connect into myself, connect into my body, there is so much wisdom in that 2-minute pause that you take to just reconnect to yourself, because your body will tell you when something's not working for you. Your intuition will speak to you in all kinds of ways. But we're not often awake and aware to listen because we're lost in the busyness. We're lost in the doing and the doing, and we forget to create space to just be. So even if just for 2 minutes, you can create that space to just be, to just focus on your breath, to just check in with your body, to just say hi to yourself. That's starting something that's going to create a ripple effect. You're going to start creating more time for yourself and more space to reconnect to who you are, because we are humans, and part of the human experience is that we have this mind, and this mind likes to create dramas, and it likes to create whatever stories around every single experience and every single moment, and then we hold on to them. And when we don't create this space to connect into ourselves, to really rediscover ourselves and get to know ourselves consistently, then we miss out on these realizations that the way we're looking at the world, or the dramas that are playing out in our head, aren't actually real. They're things that we are creating, and we can create something different.
Yeah, that's so important. I love that you said that. So one of the things that I want to mention here, and because I think it really resonates with what you're talking about, is one of my um, friends and mentors talks about how she realized, like when you're talking about honoring your body and recognizing the things that we need, she realized that like she would keep doing one more thing, one more thing, one more thing, and she's like, oh, I have to go to the bathroom, I have to go to the bathroom, I have to go to the bathroom, and like it, like you're playing it out in your head, like, yeah, I need to go, oh well, let me just do one more thing. And she realized, like, if I'm not even honoring myself to the point of like, no, I need to go to the bathroom right now,
Yeah,
like I'm not going to do one more thing. Like these are the things, and like you said, to take just a couple minutes to yourself. And we do, there's so many times when you're like, whatever you're doing, and whoever needs you, the kids come in and need you, and you're like, okay, I'll come right now, instead of saying, you know what, you can wait a minute, whatever
yeah,
I'm just finishing my coffee, you're fine for a minute, or I'm finishing drying my hair. That's a big one for me, because I used to be like, and when I'm drying my hair, and somebody would come in and be like, oh, I need this right now, okay, and then I'd be aggravated, because like you, a lot of times you like feel like in your head the hair has to get dried in a certain amount of time or it's going to go wacky, right? So
right.
here we are, like putting ourselves out when like everybody's fine, nobody's bleeding, we don't have to get the crayons right this minute or whatever it is, like they can wait just a minute, and we can honor ourselves. Or maybe it is even in the pickup line at school or whatever, like take that time to maybe take a breath, like you're saying, take those couple minutes to check in with yourself.
Absolutely. I actually, when I was kind of starting this self-care journey within motherhood, and like recognizing, okay, Katie, you need to create some boundaries. You need to like stop trying to check all the boxes and be all the things. I would actually hide in the closet, because I don't know why they would never find me in there. And so like for 5 minutes, I would just hide in the closet and I would meditate. Um, and if that looked like focusing on my breath, if that looked like listening to a meditation real quick, whatever it was, I would just go in the closet 5 minutes. And they were all safe. Like I knew they were all safe. They were all fine. They were all set up. And they didn't need me for anything of emergency needs. And they were fine. And I would start doing that. And then over time, me creating this space to hide in the closet created this ability in me. It created the capacity in me to be able to say, no, I can't do this right now. I'm going to finish this and then we can do this. If it's play a game, or if it's, whatever, it's endless possibilities about what the kids could need at any given time. Or you can do that on your own. You're capable. Different things like that, being able to create the boundaries started with me hiding in the closet, because that was the only way that it was accessible for me at that time. So I think when we talk about, connecting to yourself or self-care, or, doing the practices that feel good for you. If that looks like reading a book or drinking a cup of tea or just pausing to, look outside at nature and connect to nature. So often we want to do it in these big grand ways because we live in a world that everything's big and everything's grand, and you do it big, right? And that seems hard, and that doesn't seem accessible. It seems like so much. And so if we can kind of say, how can I do this small? How can I take one small step, even if it's a tiny step, even if it's just like a toe step? How can I take this small step to create the capacity to then make bigger shifts, bigger moments for myself, for self connection? And what happens over time is you take these tiny steps or these small steps, and you begin to create this capacity. Like maybe you start out with that like small little jelly mason jar of capacity to create self-care space or connection space. And then as you use that consistently, then it becomes like the next size up mason jar. And then before you know it, you have that like gigantic mason jar that, is like 5 gallons, and you can't find them anywhere, but they're huge. And, you can put all the pickles and tomatoes in it you want. Because you've created the capacity to be there and to do that. And it ends up turning into this ability to be self-aware all the time.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And what came to mind when you were talking about that is that even, to fill even a drop of water multiplied, a drop and then 2 drops and then 3 drops, if you're talking about small steps, even a drop of water will eventually fill up a mason jar. So
Yeah.
like you said, it builds on itself. And I'm I'm a really huge proponent of boundaries. So I love that you tried to find space for that. And I actually created a course around that, around how to create boundaries in your life. It's called the Queen Code. But what I found, and I think you'll probably totally agree with this, is that when we start to set those for ourselves, set the expectations, the boundaries, I call them personal policies for ourselves, others start to honor those as well, whether it's the kids or friends or family or people that we work with in business. They're like, oh no, they're not up for that, it's not going to happen. Like, oh, mom's taken her a few minutes and we don't bother her right now, whatever it is. And so I think, you'll agree with that too, that people start to honor your boundaries when you do.
Absolutely. If you don't honor your boundaries, why is anybody else going to honor them? Because you're just flippant, right? You're just flip flopping around. It really all starts with you. Everything starts with you. All the answers we're looking for, all like the ways to find inner peace and freedom, it's really all inside of you. It's just about creating the capacity to be aware of what's moving through you.
Um, let would let's talk for just a minute. And like I said, I know you talked about this in your chapter in the book, but it had to have been really challenging for you to start to create the boundaries, to make the steps, to take the steps to come out of that abusive relationship. And would you touch on that for our listeners for a minute, for as far as, what, how did you do that for yourself?
I think it looked like taking small steps over time, because, you know, I had been in that relationship for 4 years, and it was like I knew it wasn't good, and yet I couldn't make the choice to walk away. But then I had this baby, I had this other life that now was my responsibility, and it became less about me and more about him and what I needed to do to make sure he was safe. And, over time, I just really started to trust my intuition. And instead of getting involved in the argument or the drama of, am I making the wrong choice? Am I doing the wrong thing? Because for so long, for 4 years, being in that relationship where I was never good enough, I was always wrong, nobody liked me, no matter what I did or how I tried to manage it to keep everything in order, to keep myself safe, to keep blow ups from happening, they still happened. I could never do it right. I could never keep it, you know, and there was a lot of emotion involved. So I think it was really about taking those small steps and acknowledging when I was afraid and asking for support. And, you know, the yoga practice that I established over time that really supported me to create self awareness also allowed me to be aware of when my intuition was saying, hey, this needs to be a boundary. This needs to be a, there's something needs to be done about this, like this fear needs to be acknowledged, or and just really allowing myself to move through the emotions of it all, to move through the fear. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is the fear that comes up, because we can talk about fear, and a lot of times fear is an illusion, right? Fear isn't real. Our actual physical safety isn't at risk. And for me, there were moments that my physical safety was actually at risk. And so the fear that was coming up was an illusion in that moment because it wasn't actually unfolding. And yet it wasn't an illusion in all the moments because it had been an actual, real, genuine fear and risk of safety in the past. So I think that getting the support, asking for support, leaning on others that I could count on, and really moving through the emotions myself, moving through the fear myself, and also taking what I was feeling and putting it to the side to look at it and say, what is the best thing to create safety for myself and my child?
Right. Right.
So I think there's probably a lot of factors in that.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and it was hard.
yeah, I'm sure it had to have been so difficult. And I mean, it's incredible that you were able to do that and, see your way through that. And like you said, even with the help and the yoga practice. Now you teach yoga now.
I
Is that
do.
right? Yeah. So you help others. So that was something that, also you didn't necessarily start out intending to be a yoga teacher. You used it, you saw the benefit of it, and then you um, decided to help others with that as well. So I love that. That, to me, that's, definitely if anything happened on the way to life, oh, let me, through the
Yeah,
practice of yoga and how beneficial it was for you to find your way to want to give back in that way as well.
absolutely. I think that yoga, it's just such a powerful practice, and most of us really only know about the physical practice, and there's so much more to it that has so much benefit. And so it really lights me up to share the fullness of yoga, if it's in yoga teacher training or if it's inside of my membership, just really sharing these different aspects of yoga and how they can support you. Because the ultimate intention, the essence of yoga, is to create mind body soul connection, to create union within, to discover that calm centered space. And to create self awareness, which, I mean, I believe are all the things that support us to move through life and to be free and to really create and live a life that fulfills us and we want to be in.
Yeah, and I think that those things also, like once you put those things in place, it does come back around to like a self-love. And then once you have that more self-strength, really, like you're saying, all the interconnection, and um you are that's what I'm trying to say, is that also helps support you to create boundaries like we were talking about. And once you have these connections with yourself, then you're like, no, I'm good, and this is what I want for myself, and to move forward. And so then from yoga, your business has expanded beyond that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It all started with yoga. Well, it started with yoga. I took that prenatal yoga class, and then I had a practice for a few years. I graduated with a degree in massage therapy, and I kind of started that, you know, perhaps one of the first funny things that happened on the way to my life was that I had decided I was going to get my degree in massage therapy, and I was going to travel because I could be a massage therapist anywhere in the world, and I could live there for a couple months and have a job, and then I could go somewhere else. And then the universe decided it had another plan for me, and I got pregnant, and that was not an option anymore. And, but I still went and I got my degree in massage therapy, and I graduated with that degree, and I started doing massage therapy. And I had this really strong pull to do yoga teacher training, like to add teacher training. And as I went through teacher training, I kind of realized that I didn't really love massage. I became aware that on days that I was doing massage, I was actually tired and exhausted, and I just had no energy. And so it really became this thing that I did on and off for years, but yoga became my true passion. Like I was like, yes, this is what I want to share with people. And so I opened a studio. I had a physical studio space. And when COVID hit, I decided to close the physical space because, I didn't want the stress. I didn't want the stress, and I didn't want the responsibility of, if someone comes in with COVID, then you have all these things, just the whole thing. And so I made the choice to close the doors, and I went online. And then it turned into energy healing. I became like a Usui Reiki master, a Karuna Reiki master, crystal Reiki master, and I kind of enhanced yoga and meditation sessions with energy healing. And then I had 2 failed business launches, and I was like, okay, like, universe, what is up here? Because everything felt really good. These launches felt really good. I was really proud of myself. And that's when I realized that there were so many wounds that were still kind of festering and coming up. While I had healed them in my personal life, they were coming up in business, and I was showing up as a people pleaser and a perfectionist and trying to do everything for others, not taking care of myself when it came to the business. And so those 2 failed launches had really revealed this to me. And from there, I kind of really went into a dark place. And I talk about, this is what I kind of wrote about in Entangled No More, the wounds that can still be there. And I knew I wanted to write. It had always been something for me, but of course, imposter syndrome comes through with that. And it took me about a year after those failed business launches. I'd been following Katie, I think, the Soulful Valley publisher, and for a while, and I saw this book, and I messaged her, and I was like, I really want to do this. I'm not sure how I'm going to, financially do this, but I want to do this. And then like 2 days before the deadline, I decided to ask someone to help me. And it was immediate, and it came through, and it all worked out. And I wrote the chapter and became an international bestselling author, which is really amazing. And so now I've kind of taken yoga, and, I still teach asana classes, which is the physical practice of yoga. I still teach meditation and those aspects of yoga, but I'm also taking the philosophy of yoga and the principles of yoga and channeling them into coaching and different courses, workshops, programs to kind of share that knowledge that has supported me in so many ways to move through so many different things in my life, with others.
Yeah, and I feel like when we are doing these things, the healings, whether it's on whatever level, I mean, obviously there's so much to our energy. And as you found out, okay, you
Yeah.
thought I healed this. I feel like it's just like an onion. Like I've had it happen so many times where I'm like, no, I'm good. And then all of a sudden, whoever we call them, agents of the universe, shows up, and you're like, wait, what is this now? Like the trigger's back, and oh no, there's like maybe you're not as far down as you were the first time, but there's still this layer that has to be peeled back and has to be healed. And it's like you said, it's a journey, and um, it's amazing how your energy changed, with your business when you, and that to me again is a willingness to
Yeah.
see it, a willingness to heal, to work on your energy, and then again for you to want to turn that around and help people, but also, like when you were a massage therapist and we're like, hey, wait, I'm not loving this, it's great that you recognize that, and we're willing to make the shift. Okay, so since a lot of people would maybe just stay there and keep doing it and feeling terrible about it and not go, they'd make up whatever the reasoning is, the stories of, no, this is why I need to keep doing this. Whatever it is, this is what I trained in, this is my bread and butter, this whatever. But the willingness to recognize the negative energy that it's bringing you, and to make the shift into something else, and then to create the next thing, I think is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. I definitely sat in those stories for a while, like, oh, you went to school for this, this is your job. And it was really when I came down to my last like massage job that I had, when I quit that job, I actually stared at the computer screen when I was sending the email. I stared at it for like 15 minutes before I hit the send button. Like there was so much that I had to move through, because it wasn't just about me quitting the job and like how was I going to pay the bills the next month. It wasn't just about, you know, letting other people down. In that moment, I had to totally choose me. I had to totally choose me because I was letting people down. I wasn't sure what financially next month was going to look like for the family. I had to totally choose myself. And I probably hadn't done that since I was a young child. I mean, I was a teenager in an abusive relationship, and then I was a mother. And, you know, it was such a experience after I hit that send button, and then my body shook for like 15 minutes, which is a somatic movement of blocked energy, of stagnant energy, of wounds, of releasing, right? When we shake, we're releasing something. When we cry, we're releasing something. But so often we stop those things from happening because it's weird or it's strange or we don't want to cry. And it's that release that really allows us to move the energy through us. And so, it wasn't like I was like, oh, hey, I don't feel like I want to do massage anymore, I'm just not going to do it. It was a whole process and moving through it and healing journey. And really, I believe as humans, that's what we're here to do. We're here to experience and we're here to heal. And, you know, we're always healing in different ways, at different levels, in different capacities. And so much of it is really about just showing up and being with yourself and normalizing the human experience, because we're not always going to be bundles of joy, and we're not always going to be, rainbows and cupcakes and fun and excitement. Sometimes we're going to feel sad, and sometimes we're going to feel angry, and sometimes we're going to feel shame and guilt and all these things that we coin as negative. And yet it's really just something we're experiencing. And when we allow ourselves to be aware of it and move through it, that's when the healing happens. That's when you begin to learn how to be free, how to access your inner peace, how to flow with life.
Yeah, I love this. I love all the things you're talking about because also I think what happens so many times, again, like for your in your example and your experience of even closing, your yoga studio for COVID, so many people would, that these are hard choices and people beat themselves up over them. And even, whether it's deciding not to do massage therapy or having to close because of a more of an outward situation, and but do what's best for you. Sometimes we create something, and I'm going to speak from a little bit of experience because I'm a serial entrepreneur and I like to create something. And then maybe a few years down the road, it's not your passion anymore. And so there's this idea of, what will people say? What will people think? They'll think I'm flaky. They're gonna, like you said, like for you, and letting that emotion out, letting yourself cry. Again, the story is, well, if I cry, I'm weak. No, like you're saying, that's just releasing your emotions and letting yourself honor that, letting your body honor what you're feeling. But I think so many times we stay in situations because of these things, and it's like you said, it's okay to be like, well, that was great for the time that I had it, but I'm moving on now to something else. And it doesn't really matter what the outside world thinks of it or says about it. um, and you may never even know what people are thinking or saying, which is even better, in my opinion. But yeah,
For
like
sure.
this is the experience I had for those couple of years, and I'm moving on. And sometimes it, it, other people might even show you that, that, oh, look, they had that business for a couple of years and then they decided for whatever reason, life changed and they closed it. And look, everything's fine. The world didn't end. And maybe I could do that too, So I think it takes a lot to make those decisions. But like you said, you have to do what's best for you. And I also think for you having, launches that didn't do well, to pick yourself up from that, to, look at it, have a look at what's going on and why did that happen. A lot of people would have been crushed and said it didn't happen. I'm not going to do it. It's not for me. And you did it. You did it and moved on and tried again. And I think that we want that magic wand to wave and be like, oh, I'm going to, launch this course and 10,000 people are going to sign up for it. Well, again, like I want to go back to the mason jar where it's like one drop of water at a time. Your chances are you're not going to get 10,000 people right out the get go. So, energy moves in increments, and, good for you for recognizing whatever those stories were and trying again, making a shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And two, it's okay if there's, someone out there that they have a failed launch and they're like, this isn't for me, because business and entrepreneurship is not for everyone, and that is okay. There is, like you were saying, there's a lot of resilience that you need to create the capacity to have in business, because it's not always going to work out the way you want. There is no magic wand to wave to say, hey, 10,000 people show up, here you are in my course, and now I'm set to go. And like, there's not that. And so I think it's equally as powerful if you have a failed launch or a failed moment, to continue to show up, as it is to have a failure and say, you know what, this isn't for me, I don't want to do this. And you reconnect to yourself and move in a direction that is for you, that feels better for you, that you really want to be in, because you know everybody's different, and we all have unique things that align with our soul, and unique dharma and purposes, and things that we are meant to learn and grow and experience in this life.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, and that's the thing too, is that I feel like sometimes when you do have that failed launch, does anybody really know? other than you. Like the outside
No.
world's not going, oh, look, Katie didn't do well. They don't know.
Yeah.
You're beating yourself up for it. And so if you just can look at it and go, okay, what can I do better? Or maybe it isn't even that you need to do better. Maybe the timing wasn't right because your audience wasn't there yet. Or like you said, maybe your energy, your inner light wasn't quite where it needs to be. To, if you are kind of in the, and I'm not saying you were at all in this situation, I'm just saying in general, if you come to something like, oh, this has been so hard and I really want this launch and I really need people to sign up, like chances are it's probably not gonna happen that way. When you come with a different energy is when, the attraction's gonna come and people are gonna sign up. But equally, I did have a few years ago, and people again on this line of thought, um, where people don't know what's going on in your life. A few years ago, many years ago, I had a business for a few years, and then because of changes in my own personal life, I was like, okay, I need to make a decision. I need to close this business. I need to sell it. And I didn't intend to do it initially, but again, for the good of myself and at that time my kids, I was like, no, I need to shut this down. And I did hear people say, well, why did you do this? Why would you do this? Go to all this effort to create this business if only a couple of years down the road you're going to close it. Well, my crystal ball wasn't working that day that I started my
Right.
business. I didn't know that, life was going to change in this way. And then I would, like it's okay. Life changes all the time and you have to make your adjustments. And again, that's why like my life has been a series of changes and adjustments. And that's why we're here talking about a funny thing happened on the way to my life. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of people experience that. And that's why I love to talk to people like you that, have like, okay, we started out thinking this and we went down this way and then we went sideways this way. And like I said, for you, congratulations on going deep and doing the work and going out there and keep saying to yourself, no, I have something that is important that I want to share with people, because that also is where the passion is and where people are going to be attracted to you, at least in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were talking, it came up in my head how, you know, I like how you said, I didn't have my crystal ball that day, right? I didn't have that, I didn't see into the future. And we do these things and we get stuck in the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, and we get lost in those spaces. And so even when our body is exhausted and our body is like sick, and we hear our intuition saying it's time to pivot, it's time to do something different, it's time to transform, it's time to let go, we get so lost in these, oh, but I should or I shouldn't, or and these boxes that we don't follow what we know we need. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's nothing to judge about that. We all get in those spaces. I think one of the most important things is self-awareness, so that you can be aware when you get stuck in those spaces, and the openness to heal through that, to like literally sit with yourself and say, hey, why am I keeping myself here? Why am I stuck in this should? Why am I stuck in this, oh, I shouldn't? And what do I need to move through it?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And this is, again, something that happened to me and that I learned from. And this was back before I really was aware of, energy and stuff and doing things. But I kept pushing, I was at the time was trying to get a loan. And I kept pushing to try to get this loan. And it wasn't working out. It wasn't, either the banks weren't giving me terms that I wanted, or the bank wasn't willing to do whatever, and I went to different banks, different people, and finally I was like, okay, I need to take a pause. And because the frustration was there and the pushing wasn't working, and I was like, I was headed out of town for something anyway, and I was like, I'm not gonna work on this till I get back. Well, once I got back, things changed and it unfolded into something completely different. So sometimes I feel like what you're talking about when you're in this box, that just take a minute. Like maybe there's more information that you need to gather, or maybe, there's a situation coming down the road, and sometimes I think we have to trust that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that sometimes we can't even imagine the things that are ahead of us that are trying to make their way to us. And because of that, we get stuck in only what we can see in front of us. And most of the time, really all of the time, when that divine crumbling happens, when things start to fall apart and break at the seams, there is something so much greater and grander beyond it. Um, but we get stuck in the fixing instead of the moving through it and allowing, you know, life to unfold in its own natural rhythm.
Yeah, yeah. We'd rather bang our heads on the wall and keep
Yeah,
trying to make something happen than just go, okay, yeah. I
yeah,
love that you said that, the allowing. And so we don't know what's coming around the corner. And sometimes it's like, oh, you don't know till you look back. Of course,
for
hindsight's
sure.
20/20, and you're like, oh, this is why it wasn't working out, because something better was coming, right?
Right. Sometimes I feel like, or one of the best things that I know to do, if you are a spiritual person, if you believe in source and spirit and the universe, is to ask for a sign, is to ask for guidance. It is my belief that we all have a spirit team, made up of angels and masters and spirit guides, and they're always there with you. But we have free will. So they're not just going to smack you in the face and be like, don't do that. I mean, sometimes I feel like it happens, but um, most of the time, they're not going to just throw you random signs unless you're open to it. Right. So maybe you've been open to it in the past, but you've kind of closed yourself off to it because you stopped listening, or you stopped trusting, or you just stopped being aware of the signs that were coming through. And so it can be a really great practice to just say, hey, thanks for being here, spirit team. Can you please send me a sign? Or can you show me I'm on the right path? Can you give me a little support right now? I really appreciate it. Just asking for a sign or some support from your spirit team, because your spirit team will show up. If it shows up in an animal, a spirit animal that you keep seeing with a message, if it shows up in angel numbers that you keep seeing, if it shows up in a song on the radio, if it shows up in random social media posts as you're scrolling through social media that has the same message, just saying it in different ways, and you just randomly see it, it shows up in all different ways. And requesting that guidance, that support, and then being open and aware to the messages as they come through, I have found to be one of the best ways to move through those divine crumblings and those moments when you can't see what's on the other side because you're in it and it doesn't feel good in it. Is to just kind of reach out and ask for that support that is almost beyond your line of vision. You can't see your spirit team, right? Um, so by doing that, you're not only getting that support and guidance, you're also acting in a bit of faith and a bit of trust in the universe. And I have found it to be supportive in that process of surrender and moving through it as well.
I think that is a beautiful message, and I actually think that that's a good place to maybe wrap things up with that message, unless you have anything
Yeah.
else that you would like to share today.
No, I think that's a great place to wrap it up. I'm a Gemini, so I'll talk forever. And let's honor listeners' time. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I love what you do in the world. I love that you've, been willing to make the shifts to create what you've created. Before we go, I'll put your socials and stuff in the show notes, but tell us, let the listeners know where they can find you, websites or socials or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me at katiebock.com. I also have a podcast that you can discover on there. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Katie Bock Yoga on all 3 platforms. And you can connect with me there, send me a message, drop in on a post, just say hi. Yeah.
Great. And of course, if you want to read Katie's chapter or my chapter of Entangled No More, it's available on Amazon. So again, thank you so much, Katie. It's such a pleasure to see you face to face and talk with you and have you share your A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life stories with the listeners. And I also want to thank the listeners today for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, listeners. We appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life podcast. For more information, visit my website at www.lauramuirhead.com.